you've been told about Jesus' invitation, that he loves you and has a wonderful plan for your life, that if you pray a certain prayer, you will go to heaven when you die, that if you commit to following him, you won't have any more problems in your life. I don't know what you've been told, but if you're like most, it was abbreviated or completely misrepresented. The real invitation is aggressive, it's bold, and it takes a healthy dose of God's power coupled with human effort. But it's also for now, not later. Character transformation, not behaviour modification. Jesus invites you to attune your character to his, to possess a heart and life like his. Nobody is saying you can earn it. It'll take God's grace. Nobody is saying it'll be easy. It'll take hard work. But what if you really could attune your character to his, and in doing so, discover a whole new way of being human? If your life feels unmanageable, Jesus thinks he can help.
So I'm Caleb. I get the privilege of leading student ministry at Narrate, and I love hanging out with middle school and high school students. It's a blast. They teach me all the cool words to say, like YOLO and cray-cray and totes and all of that stuff. But I also, and one of the reasons I love hanging out with them is because it almost gives me a right for my stupidiness / goofiness and all of that. And when anyone questions it, I just say, well, hang out with students. That's my job. But I also, on a weekly basis, usually get the privilege of talking to middle school students and getting to relate and connect with them. And the thing about talking to middle school students is while I talk, they talk right back at me while I'm talking. And you guys are different because whenever I get to talk to you guys don't do that. So I don't know if you guys just daydream or what, but you guys are a little bit different. But I'm excited to get to talk with you guys. So we're in the 4th week of this series called Attuned. And if you haven't been with us, or you missed a week, a recap of where we've been. The first week, we kicked it off on Easter weekend, and Adam really asked questions like, what is Jesus' invitation? Is it only after we die, or is it in fact for us here and now, today? And not only should we have confidence in what Jesus did, death, burial, resurrection, but that we should have confidence in who he was. And then the second week, Adam talked how we all have a kingdom, a queendom, if you will. We all have responsibility in life, and that Jesus, he doesn't expect us to lead alone, that he wants to lead with us today with what we're going through. And then last week, Adam talked a little bit on how that Jesus isn't really concerned with our actions. And it sounds a little bit gross, but I love how Adam said it. Jesus isn't about character or about behavior modification. He's all about character transformation. And because Jesus, he understood that the condition of our heart, our character, that's by the way in which we live. In fact, it drove Jesus crazy when people were more concerned about their actions and their behaviors more than their character and heart. And you see that all throughout the New Testament in the Gospels. And in Matthew 15, he actually tells us an example of that. And so in Jesus' day, he had lots of groups of people follow him because in that day there was no Twitter, so you couldn't just follow Jesus and find out what he was up to. You actually had to follow him. And there's no Instagram, so if you wanted to find out what he was eating, you couldn't just look on Instagram and be like, oh, Jesus is eating a fish down by the sea. You actually had to follow him to see what he was eating. And so there was lots of group of people that would follow him, and in one group in particular, it was these Pharisees that followed Jesus everywhere. And Pharisees were really just this super religious group of people. And the reason that they would follow him was in the hopes of trying to catch Jesus doing something that he shouldn't, something that would contradict himself so they could say, aha, gotcha, you're not who you say you really are. And so lots of times they would ask him these trick questions in the hopes of getting him to say something that he shouldn't. And so in Matthew 15, there's an example of that. These Pharisees, they asked Jesus, hey, why is it your disciples, Jesus had these disciples, which were really his interns, his apprentices, if you will. Why is it your disciples don't wash their hands before they eat? In that day, if you were a religious person, washing your hands was a must. Otherwise, they would say you were a dirty, unclean person. And so Jesus, he responds to the Pharisees with this. He says, what goes into a man's mouth does not make him unclean, but what comes out of his mouth, that is what makes him unclean. Pazing. So the Pharisees, disgruntled over Jesus' answer, they go away a little butthurt because they can't get Jesus on what he just said. And so they go away, and Jesus' disciples come up to Jesus, and you're like, hey, Jesus, you just offended the Pharisees. Like, oh, do you know what you just did? To which I'm sure Jesus, he's like, of course I did. He was always offending the religious people of his day, and that was his sport. That was his pastime almost. But one of Jesus' disciples, a guy by the name of Peter, he comes up to Jesus, and he's like, hey, Jesus, you know what you said to the Pharisees about the whole clean, unclean mouth? I'm not really getting that. In fact, none of us are really getting that. You'd think you could explain that to us. So Jesus, he responds back to Peter by saying this, are you still so dull? Like, really, Peter? You need me to explain that to you? You don't get that? So Jesus, being the brilliant communicator that he was, he explains to Peter what he meant, any great communicator wants to start on common ground, and then from there make their point, but to get everyone on the same page and then go from there. So Jesus, he does exactly that. He says this to Peter, don't you see that whatever enters the mouth goes into the stomach, then out of the body? Peter, you eat, and then it comes out. You eat, you poop. You get it? You got it? You're with me now? We on the same page? You understand? To which Peter, I'm sure, was like, funny, Jesus, I'm not that dull. We're not that dull. You don't have to go all the way back to this is a football. But Jesus wanted to make sure they were on the same page. So Jesus, he goes on to say this, but the things that come out of the mouth come from the heart, and these make a man unclean. Jesus, he's concerned about your heart, your character, because that's what matters. Every time I read this text, I always think of the Blazing Challenge. Anyone ever done the Blazing Challenge? Buffalo Wild Wings? I did it about a year ago. It was after a night of hanging out with high school students, and every time we hang out with students, all of us leaders go somewhere and do a debrief, hang out, connect as leaders. I always look forward to it. It's always a blast. This night in particular, we went to Buffalo Wild Wings, and we sat down. The waitress hands us our menus. She says to us, hey, any of you guys want to do the Blazing Challenge? You get free wings and a picture, to which I instantly said, no thanks, that would be stupid. One of the other leaders with me says, sure, I'll do it. Free wings, picture? Yeah, I'll do it. To which then I instantly said, okay, I will do it as well. Because a little bit about me, I don't like to be shown up. I like to participate. I, like anyone, like to show my manliness. So I was like, okay, we'll do 2 platters of blazing wings. So she comes back a little bit later, but a little context, I'm a sissy when it comes to hot stuff. When it hits my mouth, I cry, I sweat, I do it all. Mashed potatoes and gravy was as hot as we got growing up for food, and those just don't get very spicy or hot. And so she brings us these 2 platters, but you have to finish in the certain amount of time. And so my competitiveness instantly starts when she hits the clock, the timer, and so I just start engulfing these things. Well, one after the other, I'm crying, I'm sweating, they're all over my face, but I finish on time. And I'm like, yes, thank you, got my picture taken, got free wings. And I remember thinking, wow, that's not that bad. But for the next 3 days, what came out of me was the most miserable experience ever. It burned, it was constant, it was bad. Would never recommend the Blazing Challenge to anyone. Jesus, he's all about your heart, your character, because that's what matters. What's on your inside will eventually become your outside. So Jesus, he goes on to say this, for out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false testimony, slander. These are what make a man unclean. But eating with unwashed hands does not make him unclean. Jesus, the character is where he's at. And Jesus' Sermon on the Mount really addresses the condition of our heart and our character. And so Jesus, he talks about some of those core heart problems in Matthew 5:21. Really, in this series, we're unpacking the Sermon on the Mount, really verse by verse. And so in chapter 5, verse 21, Jesus addresses our first heart issue. He says this, for you have heard that it was said to the people long ago, do not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. So Jesus, once again, he's getting us all on the same page, right? He's saying, hey, murder, killing, it's bad. Don't do it. There's consequences, and I think we can all agree on that. Murder, killing, it's bad. Don't do it. I think we can all agree on that. But what Jesus goes on to say, I think, is a little bit shocking. And the reason I think it's a little bit shocking is because lots of time we put this thing that he addresses on the back burner. We don't really understand the degree to which it can hurt us. He says this, but I tell you that anyone who's angry with his brother will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to his brother, Raka is contempt. Contempt is a higher degree of anger, is answerable to the Sanhedrin. Sanhedrin is the highest court in which one could be prosecuted in that day. There was the local court, and then there was the Sanhedrin court, and they could prosecute the king. So if your case made it up to there, it was a bad deal. But isn't it a little bit shocking? Like Jesus, he talks about this thing of killing and murder, and then he puts this thing of anger and contempt in the same spotlight. If you're like me, you're like, whoa, Jesus, isn't that a little strong? Like, I get angry, but killing and murder, like two different levels there, don't you think? And the reason that Jesus, he talks about this thing of anger in such strong language, in such strong terms, is because Jesus, he understands the degree to which it hurts and it wrecks us is like none other. Jesus understands that this thing of anger is the root, is the core of us, out of which everything else flows. It's the spout out of which flows this thing of bitterness, this thing of resentment, this thing of rage, which then in turns flow out of this thing of greed, slander, adultery, lust, theft. But this thing of anger is really the center. And Jesus is really saying, if you want to attune your kingdom to my kingdom, if you want to transform your character to my character, we got to start at the basics. We got to start at the beginning. If you want to get to second base, you got to cross first. It's just how it is. And Jesus, he also starts out with it because it's the most fundamental problem that we as people all have. We all deal with this anger issue. If you're breathing, it happens to you. So the question then is, okay, so what's anger? Anger in its simplest form is a statement that looks like this. Anger equals you owe me. Someone took something from you that didn't belong to them. Someone said something to you. Someone injured you. Someone treated you poorly. And now there's a debt. They owe you. And there's this thing of anger, this thing of resentment now. And it doesn't matter how trivial it is, if it crosses my will, your will, we get angry. And the thing about anger is we love to indulge in it sometimes, and anger is also a little bit spontaneous. Think about it. Any road ragers out there? You don't have to raise your hand. I'll raise it for you. But you know that guy in front of you who's going 45 in the 60 zone, and your patience is at first, but then it runs out quickly because why? They're taking time away from you. They owe you something. Or that person in front of you at the stoplight, everything's good, it's red, everything's calm, but then it turns green and they're not going. And you notice that their head is down. And so you're like, So me being the rational person that I try to be, I try to assess the situation. Like, okay, look for any Jesus fishes on their car. Maybe they're praying. I don't know. Probably not. I rule that one out quickly. And then I think, okay, maybe they're passed out or sleeping. I hope not. If they do, they probably shouldn't be driving. And then it dawns on me, I bet they're texting, right? And so that's when you lose it a little bit because they're taking time away from you. And so somehow your hand applies pressure to the steering wheel column, which in turn makes this magical, loud, honky noise. I don't know how it happens. I'm not a mechanic, but it's crazy. And then your other hand goes up in the air, and pointy fingers happen sometimes, and you make all these facial expressions, and they look up at you, and they see you, and then they speed away embarrassed. And about a minute down the road, you're a little embarrassed of what just happened, right? It's spontaneous. It rises in us quickly. And not only is anger a little bit spontaneous, but anger feeds on anger. Something small, something really not that trivial can quickly have a snowball effect on us and grow into something bigger. And lots of times how that happens is because we justify our resentment towards someone, our bitterness towards someone. We rationalize it. And sometimes even people rationalize it for us. You know, you go home from work and you talk to a spouse or your friend about what an employee said to you or how they treated you, and they say things like, you have a right to be angry. What they did to you was wrong. You should be mad at them. This happened to me. I used to work in the construction industry, and me and one of my bosses were out on a big installation one day, and we had got home late, and we were both tired and hungry, and we get out of the truck. He's like, hey, we got to unload this trailer before the morning. So I say, all right, cool. He says, I'll be right back and help you unload. I just got to go to the bathroom real quick. So I start unloading. I'm about 20 minutes into it, and I notice that he hasn't come back. I'm like, that's strange. Maybe he's sick, on the phone with a client. So I finish up about 10 more minutes and go into the office to see what's going on. And there he is on his computer looking at Facebook and eating supper, and I was starving. So I got a little irritated. And so I go home, I have dinner with a friend, and I tell him what my boss did. And he's like, oh, man, you should be angry at that. I was like, I know, right? He's like, you got to pay him back. So I go to bed a little bit upset and thinking, how am I going to get him back? He owes me. He took something away from me. So I go to bed about 3 o'clock in the morning. I woke up with this brilliant idea. I thought it was brilliant. So I go into work the next morning. I was usually the first one there. I made coffee all the time. Nothing out of the unusual, except this time I put a little liquid that I normally don't put in the coffee. It was nothing dangerous, don't worry, nothing harmful, just a little something. And so let's just say by 7:30, when my boss had his first cup of coffee, he really did have to go to the bathroom for that long. Don't worry, I've matured since then, Adam, so you don't have to worry about that. But right, how about you? Anyone ever take something from you? Anyone ever make you a little upset, mad, bitter, resentment somewhere in your past, your childhood, the school you used to attend, a previous job you used to work at? Someone takes something from you, and now there's a debt, and now there's some anger towards them. And it happens to all of us, right? As long as we're still breathing, people will do stuff to us that makes us angry. And the thing about anger is at first, we have a choice. We can either choose to indulge in it or we can choose to let it go. The thing about it, though, is if we choose to indulge in it, if we choose to harbor the resentment, the bitterness towards someone, it will sit inside of us and it'll manifest and it will control us, because anger is a kind of gangrene. Once it seizes a little part of your character, of your heart, it spreads quickly. It consumes you, and you become hurt, because angry people are hurt people. Angry people create environments of unbalance. And not only do angry people hurt themselves, but they hurt those around them. And getting ready for this morning, I asked quite a few friends if they would consider themselves angry people, and 90% of them said, no, anger is not really something I deal with. And so I would ask them, you know anyone angry? And all of them said, oh yeah, know lots of angry people. Why? Because if you're an angry person, you affect those around you. It's called secondhand anger. It's toxic. And for us, outside looking in, lots of times we can tell what's going on. And we can tell that it's that anger, that it's the bitterness that's affecting you. But for you, it's hard to get past it because you rationalize it. And not only that, but eventually your anger will outpace your behavior. What's on your inside will eventually become your outside. What's your character, your heart, will eventually outpace your actions and your character. And that's why I think Jesus, he talks about this thing of anger in such strong terms, because Jesus, he knows the degree to which it hurts and wrecks us is like none other. You know, the person that loses their job because of an addiction, because of dishonesty, just quite frankly, no one could trust them anymore. Maybe harassment. If you get to the beginning of them, if you get to the root, the heart of them, you find out that it's not a dishonesty problem, it's not a theft problem, but it's an actual anger problem. Someone who's had a wrecked relationship, a ruined marriage, maybe due because of violence or an affair, even pornography. If you get through the mud and the muck and the mess, you find out that it's an anger problem. And out of that flowed this thing of bitterness and resentment, and then this thing of an addiction of pornography, or answer that? Okay. Or this thing of dishonesty. So, we good? Okay, cool. But at the beginning of them is this thing of anger. And not only does Jesus talk about this thing of anger and contempt with such strong terms, but Paul, if you don't know Paul, he wrote over half the New Testament, no big deal, but he also talks about this thing of anger in pretty strong language. In fact, he even says, if you get rid of anger, you get rid of the evil, because the root of bad things is this thing of anger. He even says, don't even go to bed angry, because if you do, it's going to consume you. So the question then is, okay, anger, it's bad, so what's the solution to anger? The solution to anger is forgiveness. Forgiveness equals you don't owe me anything anymore. Forgiveness is saying debt canceled. Forgiveness is recognizing that something was taken from you. It's specifically identifying what that was and saying that person doesn't owe me anything anymore. It sounds like this. Mom, you don't owe me the childhood that I wish I would have had. Dad, you don't owe me a house that wasn't divided up by divorce. Previous employer, you don't owe me the reputation that you stole from me. Son, daughter, you don't owe me an apology for saying, forget you, Dad, forget you, Mom. I don't care how hard you worked to raise me and teach me what was good and what was bad. I don't care. I'm going to go do my own thing and forget you. Forgiveness is saying debt canceled. And forgiveness isn't a one-time solution, but forgiveness is a constant, daily exercise. And I know that none of this is probably new to you guys. You guys have probably heard this before. It's not like I'm saying, hey, you should diet and exercise, and if you diet and exercise, you'll feel better, you'll look better, you'll even feel healthier. So you should diet and exercise. And you're like, what? No way, Caleb. So glad I came. You're brilliant. This is amazing. You changed my life. It's not like I'm saying, hey, you shouldn't smoke because smoking's bad for you. What? No one's ever told me that before. I understand that. Like forgiveness, you probably know it. But I think lots of times we put it on the back burner and we even dodge it. We dodge forgiveness. And lots of times we dodge forgiveness because we say, well, that person doesn't owe deserve my forgiveness. What they did to me was wrong. How they treated me was not right. What they said to me was not cool. You know what? Lots of times that's the case. That's true. What they did to you was not right. And so we say, so I can't forgive him. The only way I can forgive him is if God gives me a forgiving heart. And so we say things like, God, give me a forgiving heart. Help me to be like you so I can forgive him. And so God's like, all right, you want a forgiving heart? And then forgive him. And you're like, no, God, give me a forgiving heart, and then I'll forgive him. And God's like, no, you want a forgiving heart, and then forgive. And forgive, and forgive, say debt canceled, you don't owe me anymore, you don't owe me. And if you do that, you'll look back in a mirror, and you'll see that you've become a forgiving person. Forgiveness takes hard work. It's not easy. It takes a lot of intentionality on your part. It's like dieting, right? You can't diet for a week, eat healthy, and then never watch your diet again or how much you eat again and not expect it to catch up to you. It's like exercising. You can't exercise for a year, go to the gym consistently, and then never go again and expect that it's not going to catch up to you. Expect that you're going to stay fit. Forgiveness takes hard work, but in the end, it's worth it. Because when you forgive, you expose the anger, you expose the resentment, the bitterness, the rage. And as you expose it, it slowly loses its grip on you. You're no longer consumed by this thing that someone else said to you or did to you. You can actually move on with your life. And so my question to you is, who are you angry at? Who are those names, those people that you've been mad at? There's some cards on all of your guys' chair, and I just want to take a couple minutes, and I want to have you guys write, who are you guys mad at? Maybe it was 20 years ago, how your parents raised or treated you, and ever since then, there's been this thing of resentment, this bitterness of what they did to you. Maybe it was a past relationship. Maybe it was as soon as last week. What an employer, what an employee, what a friend said or treated you. And now there's this thing of resentment. They owe you. Who are those people in your lives? I just want to take a couple minutes right now and let's write those names. Those names that you wrote down, those people, there's a checkbox by each of them. And my challenge for you this week, that you would hang this piece of paper on your fridge, your car, your bathroom, whatever it is, and that this week you would check each of those names off by forgiving them. That you would make a phone call, send an email, send a text message, have a conversation with them over coffee, and that you would say to them, forgiven, a debt canceled. You don't owe me anything anymore. And it's not going to be easy. It's going to be tough to make that phone call, to have that conversation. But when you say you don't owe me anything anymore to that person, you are going to be a little bit freer. And you're going to feel better because you're not going to be consumed by this thing, by what they did to you. And it's not going to be easy, and you might have to do it again and again, but it's going to be worth it. That's my challenge for you guys. And, I don't know where this lands for you this morning. Maybe you've been following Jesus for a while. Maybe you're brand new to following Jesus. My hope for you this morning is that you would say to yourselves, I give up the right to be angry. And when you do that, when you say that I will forgive daily and you put intentionality into that, you'll become a forgiving person. And you will slowly transform your character to his character. You'll slowly attune your kingdom to his kingdom. Maybe for you, maybe you don't believe in Jesus or this whole God thing or Bible. It confuses you. In fact, the only reason you're here is because someone cute invited you, someone promised you lunch afterwards, and so that's why you're here. My hope for you, my challenge for you is that you would explore Jesus on your own. And in fact, that you would even read the New Testament, and you're like, well, I don't believe the Bible's even true. We don't read anything that we believe that we know is true. So my challenge for you is read it. And as you do read it, you'll find out that Jesus, he deals with real life. He deals with what you're going through today. It's the real stuff. And as you do read, you'll find out that Jesus' purpose, his aim is to enable people to do good. And you're like, well, I can't. I got to change first before I follow Jesus. That's not Jesus at all. Jesus says, come follow me, and you'll slowly begin to change.
For more information on Narrate Church, visit www.narratechurch.org or download the mobile app, now available for iPhone and Android. information on Narrate Church, visit www.narratechurch.org or download the mobile app, now available for iPhone and Android.